My name is Zhao, and I will be presenting Dinov2, paper by Meta. Um, Hopefully is intuitive and what I'm saying is sort of accurate and helps other people out. I don't know. Anyways, so before I talk about Dinov2, let's talk about what a foundation model is. So currently in NLP, lots of models are trained on large amounts of data that can generalize to different tasks, and that these tasks produce features that can be used as they are and without any sorts of fine tuning, and it even outperforms task specific models. And so these models are known as foundational models. And the team at Dino V2 just thought about, like, how can we do the same with images? Can we do the same with images? So Dino V2 itself is out of the box, meaning you do not need to retrain your models for different tasks, and you use them as they are, like a foundational model. And Dino V2, because you don't need to fine tune it, it means they are way more cost efficient and greatly reduce development time, and they're versatile and much better for the environment overall because you don't have to train a different model for different tasks. And unlike other foundation models that uses labeled text data for each images, Dino V2 is purely self-supervised, meaning that it does not rely on the human bottlenecks of labeling each image. And by combining this with vision transformers, which are very data hungry, they are they have a recipe for success. And unlike supervised models that lack the ability to capture details like the background, since like the supervised labels, the text can't really describe everything that is on an image. An image is worth 1,000 words. Um, Therefore, by supervising, having the model learn on its own, it often captures these like pixel level details that are often overlooked. Um, so the main contribution of the paper is the data processing pipeline, and this is the main quirk of this paper. It um, introduces this way of gathering curated, diverse quality data from images from the internet. And this process is heavily inspired by how the NLP researchers do to get their high quality text data. And in the end, the researchers were able to gather a huge data set called LVD 142M, which is 142 million high quality curated images. Um, this is narrowed down from the 1.2 billion unfiltered images they found from the internet. So how this pipeline works is by extracting embeddings of the curated data from trusted data sets like ImageNet using a self-supervised vision transformer, and getting the embeddings of these images using the same transformer or architecture. And then the next step is they called deduplication, where they remove the duplicates of these images they found online. The method they use is described in another paper called a self-supervised descriptor for image copy detection. This just promotes model diversity. The same image shouldn't be used twice in the same data set. The next step is the part where we use these embeddings. We use them for self-supervised image retrieval. So these trusted data sets that we have already called ImageNet, we want to find images that are kind of similar to it. So we use these embeddings to figure that out. We use some technique called visual similarity to match these images to our own curated data set. This technique is borrowed from another paper called Extracting High Quality Monolingual Datasets from Web Crawl Data, which was a pipeline for extracting quality text, not images. But the researchers adapted it to texts or to images. The process is like we get the image embeddings like we had earlier, and then we find the cosine similarity between these uncurated images with our trusted images. Then we perform k-means clustering to get the images that we want. And overall, this process just helps avoid bias from dominant data types. So now that we have the images, how does our discriminative self-supervised model work? So Dinov2 borrows from 3 different discriminative architectures. The first one is from their old paper called Dino, which is all about image level objectives. The next one is ibot, which is more about like patch level objectives of the image, and Suave, where we borrow the Sinkhorn Knopf centering. K-Leo regularizer, we don't have to go over that. It's just like spreading things out and not sure really what it does. But adapting resolution is another cool part of this, where we know that training on high quality images is best for performance. However, training on high quality or high dimensional or high resolution images is very data hungry. So because we have this huge data set and we need to train on this huge data set, we actually train on the lower quality data set first, and then we move on to a higher quality data set at the last few layers. Basically, you learn the whole basic idea of the image, and then you move on to the finer details without having that high computational cost. So what is Dino, the first Dino architecture, and ibot and Suave? So the premise of the first Dino self-supervised learning architecture, like I said before, basically learns the overall representation of the image. So conceptually, we do this by, let's say you have an image of a person walking a dog. So then you augment different crops of the image, the red one and the tiny smaller blue one, as you see here. The red one is like 50% of the original area, covers the original area of the image. That is fed to the teacher, and then the tiny patch ones are fed to the teacher. And then these images, these different patches, are then put through their own layers and outputs a feature embedding. And basically, we want the softmax distribution of the student to be as close as possible to the teacher's version. Hopefully this makes sense. The teacher has more information about the image, but the student has a smaller amount of information. So the student has to learn what that tiny patch is all about to know what the whole image is about. And traditionally, the teacher is like a supervised, learned frozen model, large frozen model that the student tries to learn from. This is called distillation. However, Dino takes a self-supervised approach to this, where the student and the teacher is both learning at the same time. And you might think, how would a teacher learn in this case? Right? So they introduced this term called exponential moving average, EMA. So the student learns through backpropagation, cross entropy between the softmax distributions, and then the teacher basically evolves and learns by averaging the student's progress in weight updates. This is hopefully it's I'm still kind of muddy about this, but hopefully that kind of makes sense. So you might be thinking, what prevents our model from like mode collapsing? Meaning like the teacher can just learn to always produce some arbitrary distribution so that the student always matches it as close as possible. Like, let's say the teacher is always saying this image is 1 in the 1 distribution, or 1. So the for every image, so that makes the student's job easier to guess, and the cross entropy loss is smaller because it's always a skewed data. So what the researchers do to prevent this mode collapsing is by applying centering and sharpening to the teacher distribution. Think of centering as like adding a bias to the distribution to spread the distribution out more. And sharpening also prevents the centering to have too much of a effect, since if you don't sharpen it, the centering might overtake it and just make the distribution uniform all the time, so the student always guesses the image as a uniform distribution. So overall, I think what the model tries to do is teach the student to understand a bigger picture of the image from a tiny crop, and they add random noise to the teacher embedding so that we know that it actually learned relationships rather learning a static output that produces the least loss. So you can't cheese it like mode collapsing. And I'd like to think of it as like, let's say the student perfectly understands the global context from the smaller crop. So if that's the case, then it's quickly able to reduce the loss no matter what augmentation you do to the teacher's representation, no matter what centering, what bias you add to the teacher's representation. The student can always guess what that is. And keep in mind that this bias can't be learned. It's not static, so it actually is affected by the student's momentum as well, the exponential moving average as well. Enough about that. Next is iBot. iBot is another architecture where basically it is for local details and parts. So it's like patch level objective. Basically, the student network gets an image with patches that are randomly masked out, meaning like blacked out parts of the image, and the teacher gets to see the full image, right? So you do the same output of the embeddings, and then you try to make the student try to guess what the teacher sees in the same spots it's masked out. So it's like filling the blank kind of. And yeah, so this just helps the model learn local detail and parts. The next architecture is Suave. Dinov2 only takes the sync horn cov centering feature of this, but I really just like this architecture a lot. So self-supervised method a lot. Basically, let's say you have image of a pair of dogs the teacher gets the bigger image of the dog, and the student gets like a augmented smaller crop of the dog. Now you put it through a a bunch of layers for each, get some embedding out of that. Now this embedding is then clustered and mapped to different areas, or to a code, and then the student tries to guess the teacher's cluster, where the cluster was assigned. So this is just like another way for the student. So basically it's like, if the student understands from just their image about their tiny patch about what the image is about, they should be able to guess what the entire image is about. And this just helps do that. And because the loss is not based off of the raw embeddings or the softmaxes, it is based off of the clusters. It's able to have more the truth labels are, it's just cool. It's just better because clustering allows more true cases to be used to compare to each other. That's a bad explanation, but I encourage you to read up on it. Basically, this is, if the student knows what this image is about, it should be able to guess which cluster it belonged to. So putting this all together, that's how Dinov2 works. So another contribution of the paper is its efficient implementation, which uses flash attention versus the original attention, sequence packing, efficient stochastic depth, and fully shared data parallels that basically helps the model train faster by two times faster, and uses 1/3 of the memory compared to previous methods. I think the depth one and the depth one helps with the memory usage, and I think the other two, it makes it a lot faster. Sequence packing, if I recall, it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't really know. You should read up on it. I think it's pretty cool. But the one I want to talk about is model distillation. This is the distillation method we all know and love, where you have a bigger dino model teach a smaller dino model what features are important. And you can see in the graph, the blue is the small accuracy of a small dino model that is trained from scratch, and the red is a larger model trained from scratch, and the red one teaches the blue one to, and that results in the orange one, where sometimes it even outperforms the teacher in some aspects. And after all this training, here are the results. So to use the dino model, you basically, to test it out, the researchers basically built very similar linear classifiers on top of the frozen Dinov2 backbones for different tasks, like classification, segmentation, monocular depth, instance retrieval and video understanding, and they found that like it performs really, really well. It um, it even performs like on par. All of them performs on par or better than weakly supervised models, which is quite impressive. Thinking that it's just self-supervised without any supervision. Um, Here is a comparison between another foundational model, I think, called OpenClipG, which in in segmentation and in monocular depth estimation, and you can see like in the segmentation area, OpenGClip is like distorted while was many like different patches in the house, where Dinov2 it's like smoother, and in the monocular depth results like the edges are smoother and it detects more depth between the different objects. Yeah. This next diagram is a PC display for the first three components, where each component is a component of the embedding, where each component is a different color. And there's two different interesting observations found here. The first observation is that the model is able to detect background and foreground without any supervision, which is pretty cool. It taught itself what is important and what is the background. And the second thing is that it's able to understand like the parts of this emergent property. It understands parts of objects. Like you can see here, like the head of the cow and the head of the other dogs, they're always green, and the legs are always like violet purple. So it kind of understood different parts of the bodies without being taught to, which I found pretty cool. The next cool thing we can see is that like the emergent parts, this is a patch matching or image matching across images, and you can see that it understands that wheels of car could be matched to another wheel of a car, and that the most important cool part is it generalizes really well on different visual styles. Like it's able to relate the horse drawing to another horse and understand its parts, like this image of a dinosaur to the fossilized version. And it understands like these biological structures and functions, like the wings of a plane to a wing of a bird. I just find it super interesting. So the next thing I want to talk, another cool outcome of this is how Dinov2 performs really, really well on video classifications. Even though it's never been trained on these videos, on any video data, it's only been trained on images. And the fact that it's able to transfer this to video classification, it's honestly astounding. So the next thing I like to give props to the researchers on is the fairness and environmental impacts section that they had, where they checked the biases and found that it found some improvements over other previous models. However, it still had biases towards Western countries and high-income areas. And they also found that the carbon footprint is like huge for these models. However, training it on a self-supervised model might use less energy than text-guided ones or other supervised methods. It's just refreshing to see that these researchers are able to touch up on these points and own up to the possible harms of the research. Here's the demo I had, but I don't have time for that. So thank you so much. As you can see here, it's able to outline the frog, outline my toys and the lamps and the plant in the background and my hand, and understand that this hand was for me as was a person. And that's it. Thank you so much.